Thank you for tuning in to another Boer Republic podcast. Today's show is a very special one, but one that needs to be done in a specific way. Our guest is an anonymous and concerned South African who wants to get the word out about our country. Unfortunately, the cost for speaking out about our current situation can be devastating to the well-being of our friends and family, and even threatens the ability to stay alive. That is the situation here in South Africa as of the date of publishing of this podcast. You might have noticed that we've been fairly quiet for a while, and this has been because we have been setting up a means of creating more documentaries and more informative videos on South Africa, and in the process to be able to get the word out with even better production quality. In that vein, we would encourage our listeners to contact us with any leads or suggestions for interviews so that we can present more voices to enable change in this country and the West at large. We will get to you as soon as we can. We are also ramping up our activities to be able to film as much as possible on our own personal budget. So if there are any leads or places that you feel need to have a spotlight shined on for a potentially international stage, especially from a South African perspective, feel free to contact us. Anonymity is assured. Speaking of anonymity, our next guest is concerned with the state of South Africa and the potential future that we all face if we were to weather the coming storm that is South Africa. Thank you for listening. Enjoy. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
I'm keen to have a lacquer discussion with you fellows.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Before we get into the discussion, how about you just give the audience a bit more of an idea, so where you're coming from, what your perspectives are on the current situation in South Africa.
So yeah, how's it fellows? As you can hear, I'm pretty English. My background is one of a liberal, as are all my mates and family members. I had my eyes closed for a large portion of my life to the goings on in this country, and yeah, just last year I was with my girlfriend driving and we nearly got hijacked and killed, and needless to say that was my Damascus moment. It was one of the most spiritual moments of my life. All the brainwashing I'd been fed in school and from my peers evaporated into the ether. It was insane. I finally saw the country for what it is. Also last year I had people I know murdered, people murdered in my town. Couple farmers murdered. I had my uncle hijacked, my dad nearly hijacked. This year, our house got broken into. So decided to try and, do something with the knowledge that I had to try and raise awareness about the plight in South Africa, the plight that hundreds of thousands of us experience every single day. And just, try to raise awareness about the exceptional levels of violence that we face in our country.
Yeah. So, I mean, sorry to hear about, the events that happened on that hijacking, and it is difficult to find anyone who has not had a similar, or not similar experience, but an experience of some kind of hard crime. I think maybe for the listeners, try and explain what you mean, what your sort of definition of the word liberal is. As we know, the word has been corrupted in a sense, and probably tried to be co-opted in a sense by the left. Where would you describe what your mindset was as a liberal before that Damascus event?
My mindset as a liberal then was, I embraced individualism, maybe at the fault of my own survival and the survival of my family and my friends. I was heavily in favor of censoring freedom of speech. I wouldn't let people, point out the realities on the ground that they found themselves in. Yeah, and I was just in favor of restrictions against my personal freedom. I don't know if that succinctly puts it for you.
It is a very difficult thing in this country. It is a sense we all inwardly feel we want to move towards individualism in a sense, as it does give you the feeling of freedom. But at the same time, although we're against collectivist ideas like communism, we are seeing that if we don't move towards some sort of tribalism or nationalism in a sense, that we will be overtaken and destroyed, especially as white South Africans in this country. So in a sense, it is always interesting to see where someone was on that sort of spectrum of collectivism, nationalism, and, alt-right anarchy in a sense. but I'm sure we'll figure out where you are now as we go through this discussion.
Yeah, just for a bit of context, from grades 1 to 12, we had a subject called life orientation. Once a week for 12 years, and we were basically taught that we were all the same and each human being thinks the same, and the only thing that separates us is poverty. We were told to embrace this whole idea of the rainbow nation. Our history was demonized. We were fed constant propaganda. So breaking through to people is exceptionally difficult, and I feel the only way that people can see the world, and especially South Africa, for what it is if they have their own violent encounter that wakes them up from their slumber. It's a horrible mindset to have, but it's the truth and nothing but.
And how did your family react to your change? And obviously maybe your girlfriend as well, and those people close to you, because what we find is people, especially when they go through this transformation, there could be a lot of ostracism from your close loved ones, because you obviously start adopting some perceived radical ideas. Did you get any of that sort of pushback?
I've lost a good few friends because of my political leanings. And yeah, it's sad. It is isolating at times. Family doesn't really pay that much attention to me. They think I've been brainwashed. They brush what I have to say aside, and they're also very much trapped in their ideology. My girlfriend's pretty cool. I feel she also got quite based when we nearly got hijacked, and she lives on a farm, and she's also had a couple neighbors murdered. So yeah, the transition wasn't that hard for her, if I must say, because she's on board with my ideas.
Censorship has become a huge issue now, and especially since Donald Trump's tweet has enabled a larger focus on the situation in South Africa. We've seen severe censorship on platforms like Twitter, on Facebook, of Millennial Woes, Alex Jones, figures like that, even Jared Taylor and some of these other guys that merely state facts that are deemed as hate facts, but they aren't approved by the status quo.
Well, first and foremost, I just want to state my position on censorship. I find censorship abhorrent because in an ideal world, the truth shouldn't fear scrutiny. And the fact that people are getting killed here in South Africa and the powers that be are trying to cover that up, I just think that's despicable. I'm all in support of freedom of speech, provided that you don't advocate violence against other human beings. So the fact that we are being censorship, it raises a lot of red flags. I question the presence of Nigerians in South Africa. I stated that, for instance, Nigerians didn't have a positive impact in the country, and that their communities were notorious for peddling drugs and prostituting our women. And someone didn't like that, and they reported me, and I got kicked off for hate speech. I find that ludicrous, because the facts on the ground dictate so. I mean, every single major town and large city in this country has a problem with Nigerian gangs peddling drugs. I've seen neighborhoods in my city absolutely crumble and turn to shit. So the fact that I can't say anything is a bit worrisome. I know that I've received for numerous other things I've said, so I don't really try and give my opinion on many things. I try and report and stay factually grounded. But yeah, it's just a bit too dangerous to give my opinion on the subject.
Yeah, but I mean, the facts state more that their biggest influence is more in the spam boxes of people's emails than really on the ground. So, I mean, we could say that you really got that fact wrong.
I wouldn't say so. I have a good.
Oh, that's a joke. That's a joke. I'm sorry. I'm just.
Yeah. Sorry, man. I'm just in the zone. I'm in the zone. You have to put a /S over there just to let me know. Apologies.
No, we'll throw that off. No, I agree with you very much so, and I think this is what I like about some things, that you got to like something about the country, and the fact that we are changing some drug laws that will change things quite a bit if we can extend that further to most other drugs. Because then it'll take the financial incentive away, and it might change it for these group of Nigerians in a sense. And you could say as well, though they do like peddling in the illegal let's say sectors, they do show a little bit more, should I say, incentive, entrepreneurial skills than maybe our local Africans. What do you think about that?
Well, our local Africans have been completely subverted by socialism. I feel sorry for those people. They had a far greater work ethic a good few years ago. But yeah, they've grown to be dependent on the government, and that is exceptionally worrisome. But then again, how do we define a local African? You look in the past 100 years, the black population here has grown by about 900%. Who knows how many foreign Africans have moved here in search of work, prosperity, and stability, and assimilated to local tribes. We don't know. So I find the term local black South African to be a bit vague, because at the end of the day, we simply don't know who is from here.
No, I agree. If you're in Cape Town and you take a few Ubers, you would think that only Zimbabweans live in this country.
Yeah.
And probably DRC guys. So, I see that the more entrepreneurial spirit does come from the Zimbabweans, Nigerians and DRC guys. And I agree with you 100%. It is the welfare state experiment in this country has, destroyed not just sort of the African family. It has destroyed the incentive and the drive for a lot of the men. And it is probably the biggest downfall that we have. If you look at the growth of 800%, of Africans over the last few decades, as compared to whites and Asians and coloreds. And that in itself is probably our downfall.
We find ourselves in a horrible position. And, fingers can be pointed at the apartheid governments, also the British, who relied heavily on African cheap labor and created incentives for, Africans to move to our cities to become that cheap labor. Obviously, we see a lot of the family structural problems occurring and beginning at this time. But we're in a rock and a hard place in the sense that, okay, if the economy doesn't grow, we face instability, white scapegoated. If the economy does grow, we will attract millions more Africans to move to our cities, perpetuating that inequality. I feel like our economy in our country is doomed to fail.
It's a very interesting point you make in terms of our economy. We're supposed to have, since Ramaphosa came into power, we were supposed to have this bright new future. The economy was supposed to pick up, and we were supposed to have Rainbow Nation version 2.0. And since then, we've seen a severe plummet in the rand, increased unemployment. We've also experienced quite a few knockbacks in various sectors. Where employment is concerned, we've seen recently Ramaphosa and the ANC government announced the Job Summit, where they were supposed to get together and discuss on a way to fixing employment. Any thoughts on that process that you might have come across?
It's going to achieve fuck all.
Nice.
And long answer.
yeah. Like, the fact of the matter is that our economic problems in South Africa are structural in nature. You're not going to change anything by approaching the Chinese and receiving 360 billion rand stimulus. You're not going to change anything if you aren't going to tackle the unions that keep wages too high and employment artificially higher. You're not going to change anything if you don't fix our education system, which is one of the worst in the world. Fingers again can be pointed at our unions who destroy any ability to keep our teachers accountable. You're not going to attract investment if A, you can't keep the lights on, B, you can't address the crime problem, and C, you have legislation in place that bars your efficient workers from participating in the economy. We have deep structural problems, and our leaders that we have now are not going to be able to address it without cutting back significantly on their voter base. It's a dog show everywhere. No. There's no easy way to fix this problem that we have. And here's also the question. We have around 600 to 700,000 private security. Does the ANC have a vested interest in fixing the violent situation in this country? Because it's going to create a lot of jobs and it's going to generate a lot of taxes. I don't think our government has a vested interest in addressing the crime situation in this country. You look in Cape Town. They actively facilitate the influx of drugs and weapons into colored communities, for instance, actively breaking them down. This practice was started in apartheid and it continues today. Yeah, I have no faith in our leadership. The fact that they want to diminish property rights as well. If you look at when farm attacks started in 1985 by people such as Chris Hani, most of the farm attacks, if not all, had an element of robbery in it. Okay? Now, the people we were fighting back then that implemented those farm attacks are in government. Who's to say they have an interest in keeping us safe at all? Because we see the same clarion calls to war, and we see the same form of attacks taking place today with that element of robbery. Except today we don't call it terrorism, we call it crime. Like, we are in a huge pickle and we are being ruled by psychopathic communists. Like, this is the worst case scenario.
Yeah, no, I always laugh when people get into an argument whether we are in a patriarchy or a matriarchy or whatever, and you say, no, we're in a psycho bait, or whatever you can call it, psycho-archery, or can't even pronounce that, but you're right. And the thing is, whether they sit around a table and, create these plans about how they're just going to milk us dry and then, let sort of the zombie hordes take over. It doesn't really matter. In the end, the competence is not there. There's no way that they're making any of us safe, even if they focus all their attention on even a small area like the farmers. And you're right, in a sense, even sort of the water problem that was in Cape Town, a lot of these things is ill competence, and it's sometimes even manufactured in a way to get certain industries going so that they can extract more money or that they can add another tax. And that's what we see with the petrol now. That's just because they've already pushed up other taxes, they feel like, all right, well, we're just going to use petrol again just to tax the base a little bit more. And in the end, that's what I think is going to happen. They're going to slowly tax and tax away until the system really comes crumbling down quickly. For me, the question is just, when does that accelerated collapse begin? And that's the important question for me. I agree with you that it obviously is unsustainable, but the question is when. It's like the guy that goes bankrupt quickly, right? It kind of goes slow and then it happens really fast.
It's just, that's in essence multicultural, one man, one vote democracy in Africa. I mean, I don't give a damn what you be, Chinese, black, Indian. If you're running my country efficiently, you're keeping me safe, and you're making sure the water taps run, and you're making sure the electricity stays on, I don't care. But the fact of the matter is, African people have a huge issue with electing inept and corrupt governments. That is the situation we find ourselves in, and there's not been one post-liberation movement in Africa that's been voted out by the people. We're going to be staying with an ANC problem for a very, very long time.
We're definitely in agreement where the post-liberation governments are concerned. If you look at Zimbabwe, if you look at many of the post-colonial governments in many different countries in Africa, there's definitely a huge inept rule that seems to happen once the colonial or the white powers leave. You mentioned multicultural democracy. How do you see our democracy running? Do you think that many of the problems we face in South Africa is as a result of multiculturalism? Maybe in part or completely?
I think multicultural democracy is possible with an efficient and authoritarian government. Multiculturalism in general is possible with an efficient and authoritarian government, but the demographics must be stable. If you look at Singapore, perfect example. But this is the fact that we find ourselves in South Africa. We have a tax base of 6%, actively contributes a large portion to the economy, and that's comprised of whites, blacks, Indians, coloreds, whatever, maybe disproportionately whites. But how could we be so arrogant to expect that people with the worst education system in Africa, who were thrust into the modern world, who only were given the wheel 200 years ago, how do we expect them to make decisions as a collective that will benefit a country with nuclear energy? That is the crux of the matter. We are a G20 nation. We used to be one of the most powerful nations in the world, and we've given control of this advanced modern economy to people who do not know how to run it. That is the problem. And it's only going to get worse with our lack of border control as millions of more people come streaming here, because we are literally one of the only stable African countries on the continent. Millions of people or more are going to come here, and they're going to contribute to that pool of people who will one day, who will have kids, and they'll one day also vote and dictate our destiny. Like, it's a massive, massive fundamental issue.
There will be some migration out of the country, and those are taxis driving to Botswana to get their petrol there, where it's about 10 rand a litre. That's the only immigration that's going to happen outside of this country. In a sense, and that is, I think, maybe just my view, but in a sense, I don't think the ANC will give up power ever. The only way the ANC will give up power, even in a democratic election, is with violence and force. I think you can't take an organization that is built upon revolution and attack, subversion and communism for around about 50 years and then expect them to turn around and lead a democratic, peaceful country. You don't train an assassin for for 20 years and expect them to be a kindergarten teacher. So I don't see this as a soft turnaround with the ANC in power. And so with that said, what is your predictions? And if we may ask, what box are you going to tick next year? If
okay,
any?
well, I just want to add something. If you, the problem European people have when analyzing African countries is they simply do not understand the dynamics that take place on this continent. For instance, you have many investors saying, well, surely Ramaphosa is not that stupid. Surely he won't expropriate land without compensation. But, yeah, I may or may not have had a Kania, the CEO of Institute of Race Relations, who says, but that's not the point. The African National Congress has great admiration for ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe, for instance. The economy's gone to shit in Zimbabwe. Millions of people have fled the country and, they're a shadow of their former glorious self. But you know what? After 37 or 38 years, they are still in power. And those are the milestones that African governments seek to emulate and obtain. They don't care about the course of their country. They don't care if their country is prospering. The only thing they care about is achieving and, is attaining on and holding onto power. So that is the first problem. My regards with the predictions of this country. The future of this country can manifest itself in many ways. I'm looking at certain key points. I'm looking at Chinese involvement in South Africa. I'm looking at the Chinese settlements that are starting to, or will spring up in Limpopo. Very interesting. It's a form of neo-colonialism. We did the same when we started settling here. We had our settlements and we built more and they're interconnected with one another. So I'm looking at Chinese settlements here. I'm thinking if we don't pay back our loan to China, I think one of the fine prints of the documentation that we've signed is the Chinese take over our state-owned enterprises like we've seen in Zambia. I can see China taking over Eskom, maybe SAA, and you know what, maybe that could work. It's gone so bad that I would gladly accept my Chinese overlords if it meant one shred of credibility and efficiency. On the other hand, specifically in the Western Cape, I'm noticing a bit of conflict between colored and black South Africans as more and more black South Africans move to the Western Cape, and as the pool of resources decreases, as the economy shrinks. Will that lead to and translate to conflict on the ground? I'm not too sure. I'm looking at budding Afrikaner nationalism and Afrikaner isolationism in light of farm attacks and, just government's indiscretion with regards to that. They simply don't care. I'm looking at the rise of Zulu nationalism. I'm looking at the Zulu king saying, listen, if you touch the Ingonyama Trust, we're going to pull out of South Africa. So those are the key points. And what is evident is that as the economy decreases and breaks down, and as we lose more jobs, the center that was the ANC and obtained the moral high ground that kept all the various different cultural and ethnic groups in this country is slowly breaking apart. I'm seeing South Africans move apart. I'm seeing a potential balkanization of our country.
I'd like to add one thing that I would also gladly use chopsticks when I fly SAA again. So I would be happy if they can take over SAA. It kind of suck if I have to, read subscripts when I watch the movies, but anything better, because I remember taking a flight was a FlySAF Air, and then I landed the next day. I very accidentally stumbled on this sort of Marxist website called News24, and they stated that
Never heard of her.
9 out of the 24 planes was deemed not airworthy, and I just landed in one the previous day and saw a few nuts and bolts and sparks fly up every time I landed. So I would gladly accept some Chinese to take over those things. I'll probably put up I've already put up my own Joja tank and water recovery system. I'll probably put up some solar panels so we don't have to worry about them taking over state utilities.
No, I just want to add, well, praise Allah, you didn't die in a plane crash, my dude.
Yeah, thanks.
Recently, we've also had this case with Velapi Kumalo a few years ago, supposedly as a result of the Penny Sparrow comment, where he said that, where he accused whites of, where he wanted to cleanse the country of white people, where he said, but whites are secretly all a bunch of racists and things like that. He was very direct in his hate speech towards whites, and as a race in general. It was a directed verbal assault, supposedly. And recently, it's come out that that his utterances has been declared as hate speech, and he's been forced to apologize with a written apology to all South Africans. I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, do we all get letters, or does he have to write one letter and we all get to see it somewhere? Not sure how that's supposed to work. But he was sent to the SA Human Rights Commission, where he was found guilty of hate speech in an equality court. And the double standards here are quite glaring. Obviously, Julius Malema doesn't get sent to jail or fined for his behavior. Valapi Kumalo was fined about 30,000 Rand for his utterances, but the outrage is minimal. So then the question begs, but why don't we make as much noise, as whites or as a targeted group? In this specific case, we were targeted as being racist, F-heads, and we've been told we should be cleansed from this country by this guy. Where are our people being outraged? Where is the buses being burnt and the buildings being toppled over in response to this guy's comments? Why do you think we aren't as angry, or at least as vocal about stuff like this?
Because we're pussies, dude.
That's one way of putting it, for sure.
Like, there's your answer. You know what? I'd be more than willing to accept the laws of a country that forbid the racially charged insults from one group to another. I would gladly support that if the rules were applied equally and fairly, but we aren't seeing that. We're seeing a white person insulting black people or blacks, and he'll get sent to jail. But then again, we'll see Julius Malema threaten us with genocide and threaten portions of the South African population, which is completely unacceptable. But you know what? It's not going to generate outrage. And the reason it doesn't generate outrage is because we don't care. Majority of white South Africans have a good quality of life, I suppose, or majority of them are middle income, and they don't care if people are going to be threatening them if they can put the food on the table, if maybe once a year they can go on holiday somewhere, or if they have their private security. We simply haven't pushed enough to care. You also look at our media. Our media has been completely subverted. They don't have our interests at heart as an ethnic group, and subverted in the sense of cultural Marxism, where white people are supposed the big bad enemy of the world. So it makes sense to demonize us as actively as possible. If you look at the Penny Sparrow case, for instance, mainstream media reported on our utterances more than they reported on all the farm murders in the country that took place in the same year. And we have ample evidence to suggest that 1 in 5 farm murders involved torture, which indicates the prevalence of hate crimes. But you know what? That won't make the media. Won't make stories in the media. We've had 9 farm attacks this week, 6 farm murders. I haven't seen that in any media, but I've seen News 24 reports on Donald Trump walking up an airway with toilet paper stuck on his shoe. Like, this is the level of journalism we have in our country, and people aren't going to make a stone. People aren't going to care unless we do. We have to be the ones that actively channel the outrage of the people and actively, give voice to the voiceless, give voice to our people who are in a sense under threat and under siege. Help's not going to come from outside. It has to come from us, and we have to actively make sure that happens from our own perspective. Also, on another note, if you look at a case, for instance, like the Dros rapist, where a white man apparently raped a 6-year-old in a Dros restaurant in Pretoria. Horrible, horrible human being. He should be hung from his balls until he dies. I agree with that. But the fact of the matter remains that we have 107 rapes every day. And that one story we find where a white man has raped someone, I don't know if it was a black girl, but we hear one story of a white man raping someone, and that makes nationwide news. Hell, I was even seeing it on channels overseas. Like, that is preposterous. We have 107 rapes a day and we don't hear anything. We saw the EFF march to courts where this guy was, appearing because he wanted to have bail or something. We had the EFF march for that, and you could see them taking delight that, oh no, a white man committed this crime. They weren't taking delight in the fact that a rapist was caught and he's going to be shunned from society like he should have. But we have a societal double standard, not necessarily a media double standard. It's as if the conduct in this country is normalized when white people step out of line. But as I said, per capita is a hell of a jog as well. We aren't channeling our outrage in places that it should be. Penny from the door, sure. The axe murderer. Like, we have 54 murders a day. It isn't special. He's a psychopath. He should also be locked up. But The media narrative is flimsy in that regard, where white people are demonized to a far more degree than other sections of this population. It's like they're waiting for us to step out of line. Yeah,
I mean, I agree with you with the Dross incident. And for me, the weirdest thing about that is after I read it, I thought like I didn't even know the Dross still existed, because I haven't driven past the Dross for such a long time. Because the only thing that I've been seeing is Spur adverts, especially after the racist incident. So maybe it's great advertising in a sense for them. And again, I understand why news agencies, they're not going to cater to a very small demographic group like the Afrikaners. It doesn't make financial sense. The more outrage they create
and the English.
Exactly. Sure.
We're together, yeah.
And the more that they, cater to the larger demographic, the more money they make. I think in the end, we kind of all think that the war has kind of started. It is not really anymore a battle of ideas. Generally, we're down the slippery slope. It's just a matter of how fast we get down there. But I still think that this is, one of the main things we should all focus a lot of time in, and that is we are responsible to be the alternative media. We're responsible to take this drive forward and fight the mainstream media in a sense. And that's exactly what we do. And the question is, how did that happen? How did such a great group of men coming from what they did a few hundred years ago end up in this position where you don't see any outrage? And it is hard for me to fathom how far we've fallen with regards to our manlyhood.
I blame economic decadence. The enemy's at the gates, but we're still having our Brian watching the rugby every week. Most of us have a very good time. We don't need to be hard anymore. We can go into a supermarket and we can buy our food and we can send our kids to good schools. Obviously I'm generalizing. I don't mean this for all of us, so I do apologize in that regard. But economic decadence has weakened us. I mean, if you look at the Boers in the Boer War, they were hard men. They lived off the land. They lived from hand to mouth. They knew what was theirs and had an idea of their space, and they fought desperately to protect it because it's all they had. I think now it's just maybe too easy to opt out. It's too easy not to care.
It is a sense of if you really step back and you see the amount of sacrifice you're going to have to make, and again, you'll be ostracized for that, to go to Brian and say, guys, I don't think we should watch the second half of the rugby because I think we should go and get some ammunition ready. The guys are going to say no. And, it is that sense of once you see the reality for what it is, you realize the amount of sacrifice that is going to be asked from you, especially for the next 5 to 10 years. And the idea is like how do we, as an alternative media, how do we sort of instill that emotional fear, that emotional drive for the fire that is still left within the Afrikaner and the Englishman, for that matter, of course, to start sacrificing, to put his head down and to fight again for his culture. How do we do that through these channels? How do we do that when we battle mainstream media? And that's a big question, and it's a question I think we have to answer quite quickly.
My opinion, don't sugarcoat things. We need to tell our people, what is going on the ground. Or if I'm going to quote that meme, I don't know if you guys are aware of Battle Beagle on Twitter, but he has a meme where he says, if only you knew how bad it really is. And I feel like that's a message we need to be constantly drumming to people who actively listen to us. We need to tell them how bad it is. We need to tell them that we live in one of the most dangerous societies on the planet. We need to constantly reinforce the idea that our leaders call for our slaughter. We need to constantly reinforce the idea that, if you live in Cape Town, you live in the 10th most dangerous city on the planet. You're sitting on a youth unemployment ticking time bomb. But at the same token, you need to also provide alternatives, and you need to provide solutions for them, because there's no stronger emotion than hope. So when the chips are down and, it really does appear bad, tell them that there is a viable solution. That solution, I don't know what it is yet, but promote ideas that, give them hope, because that is an exceptionally strong emotion. But yeah, people need to hear what's going on. And if that's, ignites the instinct of self-preservation in them, that's also pretty damn strong too. People want to make sure their kids are able to play outside. People want to make sure that themselves, their wives, their family members, their children aren't going to get hurt when they take a trip down to the supermarket and mall, that they're not going to be held up by guys with AK-47s, that they're not going to be murdered on their farm. So the more we show people what is going on in this country, the more by their subconscious they'll prepare for the worst. Look at it now. Like when I was younger, electric fences weren't so prevalent. Now it's the norm. A lot of houses that can afford it have electric fencing. It's a form of subconscious preparation.
if you just spend any time on Twitter, I mean, it takes a few minutes, not even, to look at recent stats, to look at recent attacks, for instance. Even if you go look at Ian Cameron of AfriForum's Twitter page, I mean, he's always got the most recent farm attack pinned to his Twitter page. And I mean, just on, I can just see from that, you know, there's been 2 attacks in the last day alone. So, you know, that's the thing. If that doesn't anger you, if that doesn't call you to action, then what does? I mean, for instance, the most recent attack is on a farm in Middelburg in Mpumalanga. An elderly male victim and his daughter assaulted by 3 attackers with machetes. And the male victim was taken to hospital with head and arm wounds. So, I mean, if that clearly says that it was something that was planned, it was something that was as planned as it could be, perhaps, but these guys went in with machetes. And, you know, so there was malice involved. There was some sort of aim in mind, and, you know, someone was harmed. And it's an elderly male. So 3 against an elderly male. You know, if that doesn't already make you angry, you know, what does?
Yeah, I have no doubt in my mind that the forces that be want to ethnically cleanse us from this land. They view us as nothing more than settlers as best and economic cows to be milked. And you know what? The milk's running dry. Yeah, look at the dehumanizing language they use against us. Obviously, you know, they are Dr. Gregory Stanton. He identified the 9 stages of genocide, and he actually made an interesting speech about South Africa last year. And he is deeply, deeply worried when you have political leaders calling for our slaughter, when you have societal polarization taking place, when we are referred to as Dutch gangsters or as settlers, you know, as creating this idea of an us versus them, that we aren't meant to be here, that we aren't part of this land. And that's, you know, breaks down the human relationships that we may have with other groups. And there's a incredibly stark resemblance between the attack that took place in 1985 and the attacks that are taking place now. It seems to me as if we are being softened up and driven and scared off the land, so that when they do come and try and take the land, the communists, that there won't be as much of a fight. I mean, it doesn't make sense that, you know, farmers in this country are 4 times more likely to be murdered than a policeman, or double times as a policeman. Sorry, feel free to fact check my stats, but it makes no sense how farmers have a higher murder rate than US soldiers in Afghanistan. Like, that points to one thing. Like, it points to a war being waged against us, a silent war, or not so silent war, but a war. And it just makes no sense. Like, the same people that started launching the attacks against us in 1985, they're the ones in power now. And what do they do when they get into power? They take away our commando system. They take away our ability to defend ourselves. You see attacks on the right to bear arms. You see the Constitutional Court saying that around 300,000 gun owners have to hand in their weapons. Like, this doesn't happen by mistake. I feel like 1994 wasn't this utopia that a lot of leftists imagined it to be. It was merely a temporary ceasefire, and it was merely a way for the ANC to get hold of the state institutions. And I feel like right now, as it is, we're about to enter the second phase of the National Democratic Revolution that they talk about. They're going to try and seize land for state ownership, and we are viewed as an alien force.
Yeah, we can't agree more on that. Something we've been pushing on this channel since the beginning is for people really to see what it is. And that's why we feel we wake up every morning as if we're in a state of war, and war has been declared upon us. And again, beyond, and I think really it is a matter of, you should actually pick. It's like a triage system when you're amongst your own people, and when you're amongst briars, when you're at work or wherever you talk to people. You really have to choose. How far is this patient? How far is this person lost on the left? How much work do you have to put in to wake them up? Do they wake up with the facts? And it's literally a time when we have to try and find those people among us who are willing to stand up, willing to fight, and willing to take the battle on, because it is those few moments before the war that we are living in the moment. And how would you say, what is kind of your personal approach? And I don't mean like, are you planning to immigrate? Are you planning for a backup plan? Or what is beyond these conversations we have, and beyond trying to wake up not just your family members, friends, but other people? What else do you suppose people can do to try and fight back? And what would you also personally?
Been insane with regards to the it's in window shift. I think we should carry on talking, carry on raising awareness. For me, as to a family bride, to have, family friends talk about the potential land grabs and what we can do, that is a major breakthrough. I mean, these people were living in a bubble, not too long ago, and slowly but surely they're waking up. So we need to carry on talking. We need to carry on being an alternative to mainstream media that is not actively relaying the message that is on the ground. So I think communication is vital. I also think, in terms of a strategy, trying to reach out to, as they put it, the deplorables in America. They have a very sympathetic ear to us. So we need to, as a matter of paramount importance, relay information to them first and foremost, because they have the means to help us out in a worst case scenario. And I feel like people will wake up from there. Personally, I plan on studying in the UK for a bit. But I haven't got another passport. I'm a South African. I'm stuck here. I don't plan on leaving. I've got too many family members that can't leave with me, and it would be cowardly to condemn them to whatever horrors they may or may not face. But yeah, I plan on staying here, and who knows how it plays out. I mean, if you look at Zimbabwe was allowed to fail because, most of the white farmers could run to South Africa, and 90% of the population, or between 80 and 90% of the population, was rural. So they could go home from the major cities and eke out a living for themselves, guiding some chickens or some goats or growing some shit. In South Africa, 60% of the population is urbanized, which means that if they do take the land, people are going to starve to death in their potential millions. And there's just under 5 million white South Africans who will be helped by a lot of sympathetic, conservative, black, Indian, colored South Africans. There's no place left to run to. There's a potential conflict that could come. We should prepare for the worst case scenario.
We talked about this on the show quite a bit, and everyone has kind of got their own idea with regards to prepping, whether you're part of the Saitlanders, whether you've bought your little river holiday here, or whether your bunker is bigger than your own living room. With regards to those type of preparations, have you done any of those? It's all quite difficult to do that at this moment, I can imagine. But anything that you think or that you want to tell our listeners about?
I've got involved in a gun owners association. It's not an official association, but there's just a group of gun owners where I live, and we'll go out to the range and we'll practice our shooting. I know my father has a couple escape routes. But yeah, for the average man on the ground, I think owning a firearm is of paramount importance, because we've seen in the 20th century a history of governments taking away weapons from their populace before they kill them. And the red flags are there. We have the Constitutional Court saying 300,000 gun owners must hand in their weapons. Do not hand over your weapons. Whatever you do not hand over your weapons. Obtain a firearm legally, because a government's not going to mess with the citizenry that can hurt them back. It's an armed citizenry keeps a government in check. So if you don't have a firearm, actively look at getting one and join a club or a group of friends and, practice your shooting and just build those intra-community relationships. Build relationships with your neighbors. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to the guys down the streets. Get to know the ADT guards that guard your property. Form WhatsApp groups, because we've seen it's very easy for a mob to just rock up at someone's house and intimidate them. And you do not want to be in that position.
You mentioned the red pilling process, the waking up process. If someone was to ask you what is the most effective way, perhaps the easiest way of red pilling someone, what would that process entail?
We wait back. We wait for a few good people to get raped and murdered. That's the only thing we can do. The rage will spring forth from the family members left behind.
As we wind down, is there perhaps a message you want to leave the audience with, something to keep in mind, or perhaps even a positive message? I know this episode has been a bit bleak, but perhaps, and there is a lot to be said about South Africa, but perhaps there's something hopeful that we can perhaps look forward to. Maybe that's wishing, being a bit too wishful.
Yeah, just leaving the audience with the last few couple of messages. Rather have a weapon and not need it than need one and not have it. Myself and hundreds of thousands of people, both black and white, good people, have been in situations where they themselves have been hurt, or B, their family members have been hurt. And who knows, having a firearm in that situation could be the difference between life and death. B, just keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in this country. Take note when our leaders threaten to kill us. Take note when our leaders threaten to curtail our rights that we have with regards to freedom of speech, with regards to potential land expropriation, and with regards to, trying to seize our firearms. Best thing you can do is just keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on and identify if people in your area are being attacked. Identify where bouts of instability are springing up. Because if you're prepared, you can plan for that potential instability that may arise. Just don't be ignorant, if I can say so myself. And on a positive note, look, there are just under 5 million of us as an ethnic group. Excluding other, good black, white. I'm excluding other Indian, black, colored South Africans who are good people. I know I've been talking along ethnic lines, and I do apologize for that if that has caused a little bit of offense if you aren't white. But there are just under 5 million of us. It's more than the populations of New Zealand, Ireland, Croatia. There's a lot of people here, and we've got a lot of power. And sometimes the government and, powers that be don't want us to be reminded of that. We have a history that we shouldn't be ashamed of. We are fantastic, strong people. And when push comes to shove, we act. And we secure our existence for the foreseeable future. And I feel that's the precipice we're being pushed towards today. We should remember our history, remember who we are, remember that we have earned our right to live here in Africa. And if we want our children to have the same right, we may need to be prepared to fight for it.
Perfect. Yeah. We couldn't have said it better ourselves. Thank you for being on the show. We really appreciate it, and we'd love to have you back on again. I think there's always much more to discuss when it comes to South Africa and the absurdity that we currently face.
First and foremost, I can't believe the show's done. I've had a fantastic time talking to you, gentlemen. So thank you very much for having me on. And it would be a privilege to talk to you in the future if you would have me back on. As the situation progresses, that's me.
Great, perfect. No, thank you very much for coming on. We hope to hear from you again.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to another Boer Republic podcast. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel. And if this message resonates with you, please spread it as far as you can. Your support is appreciated. We also welcome cryptocurrency donations, and any support we receive in that regard goes to improving our content, as well as enabling us to do more documentary and investigation style videos. The addresses can be found in the description below. Any feedback is encouraged, and we look forward to engaging with you on our various social media platforms. You can find us on a variety of social platforms, and you can find those links below. Included is our email address, which you can use to contact us. We update as regularly as we can, so please follow and reach out to us. Until next time, stay safe, wherever you may find yourself.